Won't take too much of your time. I'll hand over to Phil shortly, but just a couple of housekeeping things. We do have the Q&A and the meeting chat available for you guys to use. So please send all of your questions through onto there, and we'll filter through them as we're going, or just unmute yourselves and ask Phil anything you've got. Tonight is supported by the team at Murray LLS, so big thank you to those guys for getting us going tonight. We really appreciate it. This is following on from the previous crappy seasons conversation where we focused on farming forecaster, so this is just a follow on again. So if you need to refresh yourselves, there is a recording available, and we will provide this recording at the end. So it's all yours, Phil.
Thanks, Steph. My screen's visible?
Yeah.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd hoped that we weren't having this meeting so soon after our last one, but it is what it is. So you can see my heading. Do I jump left, right, or straight ahead? Hopefully, as we work through this, it'll help you decide which of those pathways you might decide to choose. If you don't learn from history, you're making a big mistake. So this time last year, I was doing exactly the same sort of work and webinars, etc., as we are now. So what did I learn? I think what did people learn? Don't make decisions based on information you get secondhand. The number of people I've come across who base their decision on something someone else told them. Check the information yourself, because if you rely on it second, third, or fourth hand, what you're getting is that information that's been through someone else's brain or a number of brains, and you've got their biased. The number of people who made bad decisions last year on the fact that they just relied on second-hand information was large. We are becoming a nation where people just read headlines. Read more than the headline of the information you're looking at. The headline does not necessarily tell you what the information is. And again, that occurred time and time again last spring. What the headline said and what the information underneath was 180 degrees opposite. If you're going to go and look at weather data, you want it for your locality. You're not interested in what the region, state, or Australia's doing. And too often, the headlines will refer to state or Australia. What's important to you is your locality. And don't make decisions if you're confused. If you're in a confused state, the decision-making process is normally pretty lousy. Go and speak to someone who you can trust. Talk to them about your thinking. Just get someone else to chat to. This is the bomb site. I've picked up now down in the bottom right-hand corner. Always look at the date that this information you're looking at was last issued. So in this case, it was issued on the 19th of September. So it's as current as it can be. But again, I'm not interested in what Australia's doing. I'm not interested in what New South Wales is doing. In this case, I've clicked. I've expanded the map. There's a plus and minus over here. And I've gone in and I've clicked at what's come up. By chance, I clicked on a little billabong. So straight away, I've brought the information that is on BOM down to your region. And now let's look in this box. This is just for the month of October. The median rainfall for Little Billabong's 50 mils. What they've done is split historical rainfall into 5 groups. So the boxes are what they are thinking might happen in October 2024. The dotted line is just chance. So if you look at present, the boxes aren't that different from chance. Now, when you're on this live and you put your cursor over the box, it'll tell you what the percentage figure. And that one there, in fact, we've got it up here. The chance of an unusually dry, less than 23.6, so that's that group there. is 18%. Well, historically, your chances of getting that's 20%. So 18 and 20, am I getting excited? No, I'm not. Chances of above median, which sits in this box, is 53. Well, chance says it's 50, so there's only a 3% improvement. And the chance of being exceptionally wet, which is in this top box, is 26 instead of 20. Right? I'm not seeing much of a difference away from chance in that information. Another way of looking at it, so before we're looking at chance of above median, now I've gone on and selected chance of at least an amount, and you can click on that and select the amount. So I've said, what's the chance of getting 50 millimetres of rain in the month of October? Again, I've left the dot at the same spot. And what do we see? That it's no different from really what the last information was. This light colour out at Hay is in the 10 to 25. We move into that blue where Wagga is, it's 25 to 50. This is the chance of exceeding percentage, and then the dark blue is 50 to 75. So really little billabong sitting on the boundary. You've got a 50% chance of getting median rainfall, which means there is no strong driver in climate either way. It's just you're back to what we call climatology. And I'll come back to what I'm seeing on BOM a bit later in the talk. Now, if we get over to Farming Forecaster, you need to put time in to understand the site. There's very good training videos. If you look at the whole lot, it will take you not much more than an hour. It's a bit like playing a musical instrument. It's a bit like any sport. If you're going to achieve something out of a site like this, you've got to invest some time. We come down to point number 2. There are producers who are confident with the site and are basing decisions, and some of them are major decisions on the data, whereas the majority of producers are just letting this information and the opportunities it might present pass them by because they're just not confident. There is only one way you gain confidence in this site. It's putting some time in to understand it yourself. 1 hour of your time, the payback in terms of how you then can use this information is very, very large. So tonight I'm going to look at 5 sites in around the Holbrook district, but I don't know where you've come in from, but you just apply exactly the same logic to any site you want to look at. It's the logic of how I'm looking at these sites that's important, not the sites themselves. So what's your target for this spring 24? Here we are, 23rd of September. My view is we are trying to work out if we're going to get an average spring. And it's the same logic applies every single spring. If you look at it, our most profitable springs sit in the range of 40 to 70%. So what's the 40 to 70% mean? Think about it. The worst spring you could possibly have is a 1. The best spring you could have is 100. So we're in the 40 to 70% range. The years below 40%, it costs us money because we've got to feed or we have to sell stock. Springs above 70% because of too much feed, poorer pasture quality, lower digestibility, we get lower livestock performance, we get higher death rates, and we get greater animal health costs. So a number of us have been through of late seasons when financially we haven't done that well, even though we've had a heap of feed. So we've got that sweet spot. And really, once you get a spring, you are confident of getting a spring, your production is set up to do well in that scenario. That's how you've all set up your farms. So the quicker you in spring can get to the point saying, I'm confident I've got a spring, therefore that means I can run my operation under the normal management systems that I've run it for a number of years. What we're trying to find is, are we outside that range? So we've got to look at, every time we look at a graph tonight, we're looking at it, what's our chances of getting a spring for this year? Wrong way. This is one of the the outputs, and I think it's for Little Billabong, but which side it is irrelevant. So I've just done a screen jump. I've got rid of all the forecast lines. I've got rid of the red, the yellow, the blue, green, blah, blah, blah. All you've got there is the historical data in that shading colour. And where the brown meets the green, that's the median, or 50, if you like, 50%. So I've just drawn a line across. So where's the peak of spring? I've drawn a line across. I'm saying this is the average herbage mass in a spring for this location. Then the black line is what's occurred during late August and through September. What you're saying to yourself, is this black line going to cross our target line? Now, up until 10th of September, you would have been pretty confident that it was going to cross, because if it kept on going that slope, we could have in fact crossed the line in late September. We would have had a spring. But then the dry conditions kicked in and the line's taken a 90-degree turn and flattened. So let's just remember what this black line's telling us. This black line is updated every 7 days. If the black line goes flat, that means that pasture growth is the same as animal consumption. So therefore, herbage mass doesn't change. If the black line's going up, it means pasture growth is greater than animal consumption, so herbage mass is going up. If the black line is dropping, it means consumption is greater than pasture growth. Now, in the next couple of days, the next 7 days will be drawn. Now, given the fact that it's been continued to be dry and windy, I would expect that black line to track down a bit when it appears either tomorrow or the day after. But still, you look there and you're saying to yourself, what's the likelihood of this heading towards that black line, our target line? So that's one. This is another site, which I think is Mountain Creek. Again, what the site is irrelevant. It's the logic we're applying. Again, we get the peak, we draw a line. There's our average spring. Black line's telling us this little kick up would have been because there was a rainfall event, bit of moisture in the system. Pastures responded, used it up, gone back onto the downward trend. So I'm not as optimistic when I'm looking at this about crossing that line as I was on the last site. And on this one, I've put in a second line. What have I said? At this level, we need to make unusual spring decisions. So where's that line? That's come off the top of the 45%. So this is history. At this locality, given the soil type, given the pasture type, given the stocking rate, that's all set up it's explained in the grass grower information on Farming Forecaster. Historically, this is 1 in 4 years, this is the amount of food we grow. 50-50, 90, 10 down here. At this level, if we only peak out at 25% level, we're at a point in terms of herbage mass where we've got to make unusual spring decisions. And what do I mean by unusual spring decisions? We're going to have some feeding in the equation. Are we going to sell stock early? Are we going to look for adjustment? You're going to have to do things, which aren't part of your normal spring decision making. Different people will look at different pathways, but what I'm talking about, if we keep moving through spring and it becomes more and more and more likely that you're down at this level, you're going to have to start thinking about what adjustments am I going to make to my normal management to cater for the fact that we're below where we'd like to be. Now, one thing Pasture Forecast does is it only gives you graphs of green feed. So this is the Mountain Creek site. Now, I actually will see this site a bit tonight. I've actually uploaded to this afternoon the weather file. So I have weather data up until the end of the 22nd of September. These are the green lines. That's the red line on Farming Forecaster, the brown line, and on Farming Forecaster, the 50% line is in fact in yellow colour. So this is what as of today, Mountain Creek is suggesting where herbage mass might go. That's the green in the solid lines. What it doesn't show you is what's happening to the dead component. So if we end up following the red solid line, the dead component that results from that is the red dotted line. If we follow the green brown line, we follow the brown dotted line in terms of dead feed, the black, etc. Right? Now, we have planned that when we get some money and we do an upgrade, we'll most likely start giving people the option looking at the dead, because on your place, you see you see this and this. At present, Farming Forecaster only gives you this. So if green is dropping off, remember, some of that material is not disappearing out of the system. It's moving from the green pool to the dead pool. We do give you some indication already on Farming Forecaster about what's happening overall in terms of ground cover. So there's a graph called ground cover. Again, this is the Mountain Creek site. And here we are, there's the black line. So ground cover is tracking pretty well, even if things turned absolutely pear-shaped, which is a colloquial description of what the red line is. You're still sitting in ground cover territory, which is not a disaster, right? So the ground cover calculation takes account of green and dead. So there is some information there for you about the dead at present by just looking at what's happening to ground cover. Now let's look at soil moisture. Currently in the Holbrook region, we've either got new probes in the ground, or we've got old probes that have been playing up, not working at all levels. So at present, the active probe network in sort of the area east of in the Holbrook region isn't that great. So really, what we've got to do is go and look at what the information we're getting about soil moisture out of the model. So this, we've clicked on the pasture forecast side, we click the more pasture detail button, and we go down and we start seeing these graphs. So you'll see this, 2 sites, and then we'll see the pasture forecast. Little Billabong will always be on the left, and Mundaroo will be on the right. Quite radical differences. So the red dot is where soil moisture currently sat when this data was calculated, which was on the 14th, 15th and 16th of September. So the red dot in both sites represents where soil moisture was averaged over those 3 days in 2024. The box plot, which is the name for this little thing, it tells us where soil moisture has been for the same 3 days, 14, 15, 16 September, in the years 1994 to 2023. So if we look at a little Billabong, soil moisture is currently at very low levels compared to the same days in history. We still have moisture. This is plant available soil water. We've still got 20 millimetres of plant available water, but we would normally have, in an average year, we'd have 65. If we come across, heading up into the higher country, totally different story. They're sitting just below average. Right, and that's why there's 60 mils of water. The colours change because it's above 25%. When it's red, it's because it's below 25%. So what implication has that got for the pasture forecasts? Because it's this soil moisture is one of the major drivers of where the forecast is going to go. So again, Little Billabong is on the left. Things kicked away really well, and then bingo, we get to the weekend of September, and suddenly the impact of soil moisture starts to play, and suddenly that line levels out. There's still some growth. So what's this growth? If you have that little eye over here, if you put your cursor over that, it actually tells you what day that growth applies for. This 34 kilos per hectare per day was for the period 10th of September to the 16th of September. Now, it's travelling very well. It's tracking above the blue line, exceptional performance. But I think it's fair to say that that black line will most likely drop over and start heading towards the yellow. But yes, you're coming off a good position. If we go over to the higher country, very similar behaviour in terms of earlier on. We saw more moisture in the soil. due to rainfall events, and that black line hasn't had that tech that this site's had, and it's kept on powering away. You know, if you look at this original forecast, there's a 50% chance of getting above the spring peak at this site, and I think the odds in this locality is looking pretty fair. A growth rate of 72 kilos a day for that same period. Let's come back and look in a few other areas. So we've gone west of Holbrook out in the Mountain Creek Road region, down to Brocklesby. Here, very similar scenario in that our current soil moisture, again, 14, 15, 16 September, is at very, very low levels historically. But this time, we're only talking about a very small amount of moisture left in the soil. Right? So those plants are certainly under moisture stress in terms of what they're doing. Now, let's look at these two lines again. August was fine. This is the Mountain Creek one, but it was early September. The plants started being stressed. Right, they're still growing, but they're struggling to get moisture. They're not finding it easy to collect it, so it starts having a negative impact on what they do. And now we start seeing this dropping of the black line. Again, there is still growth occurring, but the rate at which we're consuming it is greater than the rate at which it's growing. A little kick up here. There must have been a rain event come through, boosted it up a bit, and then that moisture's gone and back down we go. Possibly same thing. Early September starts drying off, a bit of a kick. Now, if we look at these two, this site, 50% forecast done at the start of September wasn't even getting us to the peak of this 25% line, which I think is the one where we start thinking about we'll have to make some unusual decisions. This one's a bit better, it got a bit higher, but we still didn't get there. You know, neither, I suppose. The further you go west, time is not in your favour. The further you come east, time is still a factor. We're not done and dusted, and as we know, there's a rainfall event coming through this week. What that gives us might influence what your attitude to these two sites are. Steph, at that, is there any questions floating around so far about what I've said?
Not yet. There's nothing on the Q&A or the chat. But if anyone does have anything, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. Otherwise,
silence reigns.
Yeah.
Rightio. Now, what might be the impact of rain this week? So to do this work, I've used the Mountain Creek Road site. Why? Because obviously it's on the drier side, and it's the one that's most in need of the rainfall event. I can't change the future rainfall in the model, but what I can do is alter the amount of moisture in the soil at the start of the forecast period. So what did I do? I downloaded the current weather file for Mountain Creek this afternoon. So that gave me complete weather details up until the end of the 22nd of September, 2024. Then I went into that file, and on the 21st of September, I said we either had 10 mil rainfall event, 20 mil rainfall event, or a 30 mil rainfall event. So I've created 3 different rainfall files. We might get the rain on the 25th. I couldn't do that, so I had to do it this way. And the number of days difference isn't going to make much effect. So this moisture was in the ground before I ran the tactical runs. So the rainfall I used after that, it was exactly the same rainfall that had got applied to the 10 mils, exactly the same rainfall that got applied to the 20 mils, exactly the same rainfall that got applied to the 30 mils from the 23rd of September through to the 31st of December. So any differences in the graphs I'm going to show you is because of this moisture that I put in the ground on the 21st, and hopefully you will have in reality on the 25th. So it's just a way of advancing what you will see on Farming Forecaster, say 10 days down the track. Now, the dotted lines are the historical 30-year historical data. So the dotted red line is the 10% data. Dotted brown line is the 25%. Dotted black line is the 50%. So that's the median green feed at this locality between the 23rd of September through to the end of December. The 10% line's the very dry one, 25 is the 1 in 4. I haven't worried about showing the ones up above. No point going and looking at data which it's highly unlikely we're going to have to deal with. And then the 3 solid lines, blue is if we had a 10 mil rainfall event on the 21st. The pink is if we had a 20 mil rainfall on the 21st. And the green is if we had a 30 mil rainfall on the 21st. So the only reasons those lines are varying is because of those 3 rainfall events. Now, what I'm showing you is, because I then do tactical, so I've virtually got 3 Mountain Creek farm systems. One that's got an extra 10, one that's got an extra 20, one that's got an extra 30. I run them with exactly the same weather, daily weather, for 30 years. Now, if you look at Farming Forecaster, you get the 10% line, the 25, the 50, the 75, and the 90. On this graph, all I'm showing you is the 10% lines, which means that we had this rainfall event and then we had a very dry spring for the rest of through to the end of December. Right. So the difference between the lines is because of those rainfall events, but the path they follow is because at present I'm only showing you the 10% lines. Just note where these lines sit in relation to the red dotted and the brown dots. So that's the 10%.
Excuse me, Phil. I have a question.
Yep.
Is there a particular reason or rationale that you can give? Because to start with, I'm actually surprised that there's not more difference between those graph lines based on the variation of that 10 mil, 20 mil, and 30 mil. Well, is there a rationale that you can propose as to why the lines still hit the bottom in that mid-November range?
Because the difference of 20 mils, which is what we're talking about, 10 to 30, we're only talking about a difference of 20 mils. The effect it's going to have is short-lived.
Yeah, okay.
Right? It doesn't. If we have a totally, I'll go back to the site at Bookham, which I've been working on now for over 30 years. If we have a totally full soil profile at the end of August, that gives us 6 weeks of spring growth with no other rain.
Yeah.
Now, a totally full profile is about 100 millimetres of moisture. Right? So 20 mils, it seems substantial, but plants can chew through, and as temperature goes up, we can chew through 20 mils of moisture very quickly. What's the 20 mils of moisture giving you? If you look at, if you look here, it's about 400 kilograms of green feed. Now, 400 kilograms of green feed when you're in a very tight situation is a substantial amount. So you might look at it and say, well, 20 mils, an extra 20 mils hasn't done all that much, but it's that extra 20 mils is explaining all the difference between that blue line and green line all through that period. That's a lot of food.
Yeah.
You add all that up, that's a substantial amount of food which comes from 20 mils. It mightn't jump out and hit you in the face. That's what it is. You know, you can really see the impact of that. Look what happens when we get the 30 mils, we almost flat line, whereas the other one keeps dropping away. Now remember, I'm positive because I'm confident you're going to get some rain. So anyhow, that's the 10% line where we've had the rain, but we really get no follow-up. Maybe some of your question will become a bit more obvious when we go to the next slide.
Yep. Thanks, Phil.
The dotted lines are exactly the same. The dotted lines do not change in any of these slides because the dotted lines are the 30-year historical data. This time, it's exactly the same. The colours haven't changed. All I'm doing now is I'm showing you the 25% line. So suddenly everything's gone up. See where the blue and purple are compared to the red dotted line? Everything's lifted up. We've had that moisture in the ground, but now we've actually got a bit more follow-up rain. That's the difference between the 10 and the 25%. It just means in the 25%, the spring's has given us a bit more rain going into the future. So suddenly the 30 mil line has gone flat for a lot longer. It's gone out an extra 10 days before it started dropping off. These have all moved up. And if I go to the 50% line, quite a radical difference. Okay, so if we get that bit of rain and then we get 50%, if you like, the average or normal spring rain, that comes through, you get a quite radically different graph. Is that sort of making a bit more? Is it starting to look like how you thought it would, Jess?
Yeah, it is now, and I understand. I'm understanding what you mean as well. With that, so, when you actually compare the matter that's in the paddock, that makes a lot more sense.
If you just get 30 mils and no follow-up, it's not going to make much difference. If you get that extra 20 mils and you get follow-up, it adds to it, and suddenly you now think of between these two. And again, the only thing difference between the blue and the green line is the 20 mils, extra 20 mils at the start, because they've had exactly the same weather after that. You start looking at the amount of feed which sits between the blue and the green line. That's a large amount of food. So that 20 mils has ended up, if you get follow-up, ends up being something substantial. Now, at the start, I was talking about, are we getting to our spring average? Well, here's our spring average at the top of the graph. Well, in this one, we're our spring average, but we're starting to narrow it down. Even if we get to 40% of spring averages, we can still have a pretty good production system. Just look at what's happening here. Because the season's been dry and it's delayed things a bit, we actually get green feed out here when we wouldn't have in a normal year. Things would have peaked earlier but shut off. This way things have been extended. So if you start thinking about what's the feed I've got between the black dotted line and the green one and put it on top, this one, with that if we got 30 mils this week, and then we get average rain, for Mountain Creek, this is starting to get pretty close to an average spring. If we only get 10 mils, a different story. But just trying to talk through how you might look at this information and make some sense of it. Now, I've now gone up to the Glenroy site, which is just east of Tumbarumba. And I'm just going to do this from a different point of view. I just thought I'd use a different way of presenting data. And often that will ring bells in people's mind, which mightn't have happened before. What I'm showing you here is the soil moisture, plant available soil moisture. This is millimetres of soil moisture. On the 22nd of September from 1994 to 2024. So this dot down here, that's the amount of soil moisture that was at Glenroy in 1994. This is the amount of soil moisture that is at Glenroy on the 22nd of September 2024. We actually have more moisture in the soil at Glenroy this year than we did on the 22nd of September last year. The worst year was in 2006. The wettest year was in 1998. So that's where it is on the 22nd based on the rainfall that area's received. Now, what happens, again, on the Glenroy, I went and put in those 3 rainfall events, 10, 20 and 30. I've only shown you 2. If we got the 10 mils on the 21st, it pushes the current soil moisture from there to there. If we get the 30 mils, it pushes it from there to there. Once we get, if you start looking at that, and assuming, think about this, the rainfall that might fall this week, we're starting to get, we're not at average, but we're not far off average moisture levels for late September. That's moisture in the soil, which the plants can use to grow through spring in periods when the rainfall might be topping up. So Glenroy would be at present travelling okay. If there's 30 mils come into the system this week, I think it pushes their soil moisture into pretty normal levels for this time of year, and I'd be happy to say I think that country's going to have a spring. If it's only 10 mils, I'm backing off that comment, but if we get up to 30, it does. Summary. Question you need to answer yourself. Does your pasture base have the capacity to respond to late October rains? So that means you've got perennials in the system, being sown perennials or native perennials. It could be that you've got lucerne in the system. It could be that you've got a fodder crop in early and it's coming up. If you've got something there, so I know the annuals are gone. The annuals have packed up at Yass. And dusted 3-4 weeks earlier than we'd normally expect. If you've got some perennials in the system, because it has been a bit on the cool side, that's a plus for us. We can kick away if we get rain in through October. And again, I can remember I've seen springs where at this time of year things were pretty desperate. Where then we got some late October rain, and by the time we got to December, we were sitting around saying, well, quite frankly, pasture conditions are pretty good for this time of year. And we had excellent weight gains in young stock during springtime. Why did we get excellent gains in young stock through that period? If our springs are below average, the plants don't go through the reproductive phases quickly, therefore don't get as much lignin, therefore we have high digestibility in the pastures. High digestibility, the animals that gain most from that are young animals. So I remember I was doing a weaner trial during conditions like this, and on one of the properties, they ended up weaning merino lambs that year that were 8 kilos above average. Why? Purely because of when rains fell and purely because of pasture digestibility. So if you've got those perennials and we do start getting some rain, this incredibly dry, and I can't remember a September like this before, so dry and windy. If October turns around a bit and the rain comes in and the pastures respond, you might look at your place and say, well, herbage mass is down on condition, but stock might be doing better. And if you think about how your property's travelling, it's a combination of what weight have you got on the stock, or what condition have you got on the stock, and how much pasture. So if you're down a bit in pasture, but your stock have put extra weight on, so therefore going to leave the property earlier, or a greater number are going to leave the property earlier, that's a balance about pasture conditions. So we do get some swings and roundabouts with nature. So digestibility, high digestibility in springtime can be a plus. I'm not seeing any signs of La Nina in the current BOM data for this region, which was issued on the 19th of September. In the last week, I would have had a number of articles come through from service organisations who are involved in agriculture, and in their headlines, they're talking about La Nina. Australia's a big country. I dare say somewhere in Australia, they most likely have got La Nina conditions which are looking positive. But in the area where we're talking about, it's not there. So I wouldn't sort of sit there and say, oh, La Nina is going to get me out of a hole, because the data just isn't saying that. The biggest issue we have with a poor spring is low summer feed and ground cover. It's often a problem after Christmas. If the area you're in is looking like ends up going that way, stock plan is the best tool to test out the unusual stocking decisions you have to make. So our stock plan was a product developed with a lot of producer input back in the late 90s, early 2000s by BPI. It is still relevant today as it was back then. It was used extensively across Australia in the early 2000s millennium drought. It is the best product without shadow of a doubt to help test out if you're forced because of seasonal conditions to do something unusual. Try and get your hands on a copy. You can get my email off the staff at Holbrook. Talk to me. It's the best product there is to help make decisions about which way you're going to go. And with Farming Forecaster, the rain you are going to get this week, and it will be positive, it'll have an impact on the starting soil moisture for the next forecast period. So on about the 3rd of October this year, the forecast will come out going from October to January. That's the first time you're going to see on Farming Forecaster the impact of the rain you get this week. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that's in the ground. Farming Forecast will pick that up. You'll see the impact of that rain on the 3rd of October. What I did for you tonight in just whacking some different rainfall amounts in is something that I can do that because I'm working on the computer. It's not something we can do when you automate grass grow, you lose some functionality. I was able to do it. Farming Forecaster can't do it. But any rain, the impact you'll see on about the 3rd of October. And just to finish off, we give you data on stock performance, and this is you body condition. These are the male potential live weight of weaned male progeny. What I just wanted to point out here, you've got your lines, your red, your 10, your 25, your 50. So this is your really dry conditions, 50s normal. There's not much difference in the weight gain of these animals over this period between those various conditions. And why? While herbage mass might be less on the red line, digestibility is improved compared to the 50% line. So you get a bit of catch up occurring. So it's that digestibility issue. And even though things might be a bit tough, the ewes again, digestibility is helping with the ewes. So this information's there, always updated every month. And Jess and Steph, I'll stop sharing because I've come to the end of my talk.
Thanks, Phil. We'll get into some questions if anyone has any, but I'll kick things off because I do have one for you, Phil. Can you please explain climatology and Access S on Farming Forecaster and the impacts that has on decision making?
Yep. So climatology is what I've shown you all tonight. Climatology means we go back and use the 30 years of daily weather data for that locality, and that weather data set goes from the 1st of January 1994 to the 31st of December 2023. So we've got 30 years of daily weather data at each locality. And the daily weather set at each locality will be different. The daily weather data from Glenroy was different to the daily weather data at Mountain Creek, right? Because we get it off 5K grids. So that is climatic data that has been recorded in that area. We use 30 years of it. That's climatology. Climatology is you are using the past climate. Access S is we are grabbing forecast data from BOM. So earlier on in my talk, I showed you the forecast data that you would have seen many times in newspapers, on TVs, etc. The coloured maps of Australia from BOM. That's forecast data. That is generated by the program called Access S. That's the name of the computer program. It works every day and generates forecasts. We are able to grab, each day produces 11 forecasts. We are able to grab the 11 forecasts for the last 3 days of the month. So on the forecast that you're looking at present, which goes from September to the end of December, the data we would have grabbed out of the Access program was the data from the 29th, the 30th and the 31st of August 2024. So we grabbed 33 forecasts from BOM, and instead of using 30 years of measured data, we're using 33 years of forecast data. So you've seen it, Steph, there's the button there. I look at what the lines are on climate. I click to Access. Do they vary much? Now, what I suggest, if people are flicking from climatology to Access, only have a couple of lines highlighted. I often just highlight the 10% and the 25%. Flick between the two. If you decrease the number of lines you're looking at, you'll find you'll pick up the trend better. So when the new forecast comes out on the 3rd of October, which will go October, November, December, January, it will pick up the runs out of Access from the 28th, 29th and 30th of September. The last 3 days of September picks up 11 runs from each of those days. So it will have 33 runs of forecast data out of Access. And then climatology uses 30 years of actual measured data. Access uses 33 years of forecast data. Flick between the two, and you're looking at, am I seeing any radical difference? If you're not seeing a radical difference between the two, what that's saying is the forecasts are behaving just like they are in climatology. If there's climate drivers, which is what Access picks up, climate drivers either way, it'll make it look a lot worse than climatology, or it'll make it look a lot better than climatology. If there was a strong La Nina signal coming in for the Holbrook district, when you click on Access, the lines should look a lot better than they do on climatology. Now, at present, I haven't looked at it because I don't think there's much change. There might be a little bit of improvement, but to me, it's not enough. It's not anything radical. Does that help?
Yeah, no, it does, thank you.
I look at climatology first, then I just flick between that and Access, and if I don't see anything major, I just go back to climatology. That's the way I use it in my own mind.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Thank you. Any other questions?
I've got one, Phil. With the box plot you were showing before, so the plan available water. So over what depth is that plan available water measured?
Root zone for that soil type, Nick.
Okay.
Rightio. So
that varies.
It varies. Yeah, it's not constant. So you've got in the model, it'll take account of soil depth, it'll take account of bulk densities, it'll take account of how quickly water moves through the profile, whether it's a free draining soil or whether it's a duplex where the water will basically got a plug and builds up. Based on those characteristics, the model will decide about where roots will grow how deep they'll grow into the profile. So you put those two things together. So on all those soil characteristics, that's determining where water's going to go or not go. And then, so on each site, on one site, that plant available water might be in the top 40 centimetres. On another site, that plant available water could be 70 centimetres or 80 centimetres. Right? So it's a characteristic of the soil type and the pasture and where the roots could go. Whereas with our probes, we display moisture down to 60. So in some soils, the 60 centimetre could be deeper than where the roots are, on other soils, the roots might even go a bit lower than 60. Right, so they're showing you slightly different information. The characteristics for the soil we use in the model are typical soils for that locality, not necessarily the soil where the probe is. So I have a soil atlas of Australia I can go into. I put the latitude and longitude on there, and I'll get 5 or 6 major soil types come up. And I'll have a look at those, flick between, and sometimes it wouldn't matter. There might 3 of the 4, it wouldn't matter what I use, I'll get similar results. Right. So in the model, we are tending to use a soil which is typical for the region. We're not just picking the soil. Like we've got some sites in Tassie, which for a range of reasons we won't discuss, the probe were put on an atypical soil. Well, we didn't use the atypical soil, we used the common soil, which is because therefore it's relevant to more people in the area. Does that sort of explain it?
Yeah. No, that's good. I've got another one too. Then following on from that, if you don't mind. But so the with the like with sites that are fortunate enough to have functioning soil moisture probes, and so you display the percentage there. Is there a way of displaying the plant available water for the probe so that you can compare the probe plant available water versus the modelled?
If you could find me about $3,000 each site, the answer is yes.
All right.
Right. It's just a matter of going in and getting all that data for that site. And it's a slow and tedious job. I did it back at Bookham 25 years ago. If we have all that data, we could display plant available water. We haven't got it because it's too dear. Well, I'm not 25 years ago, it cost us about $1,300 a site, and that was through the CSIRO lab. So what it would cost in a commercial lab now, I don't know. And there's a lot of work involved. So that's the question, mate.
Yeah. No, just thinking like it might be useful to sort of compare modelled versus actual, like it, and whether there is much of a difference. I don't know what you found at Bookham, like, or is it the model pretty good at estimating the current moisture level?
The biggest thing which we've found this year is what's the rainfall that is recorded for the 5K square grid.
Yeah.
And what was the rainfall that the probe actually saw? So at Bookham this year, the actual probe got under about 40 mils more rain in July and August than the rainfall data I downloaded for the 5K grid. So if at the end of August, if you go in, the Bookham probe was sitting about 75%, and the Bookham soil model was way down the bottom. And that was just due to the fact that the probe had picked up a rainfall event which a lot of the region hadn't picked up. If I go into the weather file and put the missing rainfall events into the weather data, what the model's saying and what the probe's saying actually come back pretty close together. Right? So there's a probe can either get rainfall events or it can miss rainfall events compared to the 5K grid, and that often ends up creating more noise than differences about how the two things work. The bottom line, mate, is we'll never have the perfect system. I think both of them give us good information, and you use what is available to you depending on the sites you're looking at.
Very good. Thanks, Phil.
Any other questions? We're 5 minutes to 8, so we've still got a couple of minutes for more questions.
Yeah, just a quick one, if that's okay, Phil. Jackie Wood. just with we probably follow the Mountain Creek one of interest. How is that with that down, and it's how is that potentially going to impact the forecasting for that site?
Doesn't impact it at all. Right? The weather data we use to drive the forecasts comes from the 5 kilometre square grids that BOM produce every single day. We're not relying on the moisture that comes from the moisture probe. We need eight pieces of daily climate data, weather data, and the only place we can get that from is BOM. So that's why no probe can give us all the data we need. And also, we need that data back to 1994 to give you that historical background to compare against. So the fact that the probe isn't working makes no difference to the forecast. The forecast you're looking at is exactly the same today as it was when the probe was working, right? So, Nick and I have had this discussion before. I think in the Southeast LLS, we ended up putting more probes in than we needed to. But probing the ground costs money to maintain. We've got to be mindful that none of this is free. And so a site without a probe can give you a lot of information. Probe's the icing on the cake. I don't think it's the major player. I reckon pasture forecast is about 60-70% of it, and the probe's the other bit on top, because it tells you a few things you can't see from the probe. But don't worry that there's anything wrong with the data. The data's perfect. The data's as good as it ever has been.
Oh, thank you.
Just do your rain dance. Right? You want to do your rain dance and get that 30 mils.
Saying. That's pretty clear after looking at your data.
Yeah, my knees are playing up, so I can't do rain dances anymore. So don't look at me.
Any other questions?
Just my final comment is, you can just apply the same logic I've shown tonight to any site you want to look at. It's the logic about how you go to look at it that's critical. It's not the site's name.
Cool. We might close things off there. Once again, thank you, Phil, for your time tonight. Very insightful, as always. As I mentioned earlier, a link to this recording will be available on our YouTube, on our website, if you remember, in the next newsletter. So keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, have a good evening, everyone.